Much empathy, especially coming from when you were a child, will literally destroy your life. And the main reason for that is because I believe for me it started when I was like, I'd say like third grade. I started to realize what empathy was, right? I started to sympathize with animals. I started to sympathize with people. I apparently there was a moment when I was a kid. I think it was like when I was just barely walking, or actually I think I was like, I think it was two when it happened. So before I started walking, and I guess the first moment of like empathy or feeling emotion was, my mom told me it was when the TV was on. It was when Obama was being elected as president, and everyone was like cheering on the TV. Everyone was cheering. Everyone was clapping. Everyone was like laughing or whatever. Just being happy. And then apparently I was in my cradle and I was just like clapping and laughing and having a blast, even though I didn't really understand the gravity of the situation or what was going on, right? But I think that was the earliest time that I felt, or like, yeah, I guess felt like sympathy, or like had some sort of emotion or like empathy. Um, but I really started to understand it around, like I say, like third grade. And the reason why I think it will destroy you is because when you're younger, and let's say you're not really good socially, right? You didn't really have a lot of friends growing up. You start to think more, right? Especially like if you're an overthinker and you have a lot of empathy and you can sympathize with people, right? It gets to a point where it's like when you start to think about why people aren't hanging out with you, you start to sympathize with the fact that they aren't hanging out with you, if that makes sense, right? So, like, say you're like third grade, maybe you're sitting alone at a lunch table, and nobody's coming up to talk to you, and you don't really have any friends. You start to think about why you don't have friends, right? And you're like, oh, maybe I don't have friends because I'm not funny, right? And you start to sympathize with the fact that you're not funny, right? So like it becomes more, I wouldn't want to hang out with me either because I'm not funny, or I wouldn't want to hang out with me either because I'm not this or I'm not that, right? Which is when sympathy and having too much emotional understanding and too much emotional intelligence, and just the whole idea of thinking too much as well, when those things combine, I feel like it's really dangerous, especially like I said, when you're a kid, because you don't really understand these concepts. You don't really understand why kids won't talk to you. You don't really understand why people won't communicate with you. Um, and then that's something that just carries on as you get older and the situations get worse. And like I mentioned in previous video, is Gen Z really sucks at communicating. Like we have the worst level of communication. Like our communication levels is really bad, and a lot of Gen Zers are feeling depressed or sad, right? So when you couple that with what you were feeling as a kid, I guess it starts to make more sense as to why kids weren't speaking to you. It starts to make more sense as to why people weren't talking to you. And when you get to middle school, when you get to eventually high school, you start to understand why a lot of kids won't really walk up to you and say, hey, like, my name is this, my name is that, like, I thought you were a cool person, or, you know, excuse me, or like the random situations where you just randomly make friends. Like, I made my first friend in third grade when some kid gave me $1 that he didn't want for lunch. Like, he literally just ran and he's like, "Hey, do you want this?" And I swear we've been friends ever since. Um, so things like that aren't really common anymore because of the fact that a lot of people are feeling depressed. A lot of people are feeling alone, and social media has kind of pushed that agenda. Is like, oh, you know, being alone or being lonely isn't really what it seems, right? It's really because of this, or it's really because of that. When in reality, it's just that there's a collection of people that are feeling lonely or alone. It's not just one or two people or like a couple of hundred people. Like, it's thousands of Gen Zers, hundreds of thousands of Gen Zers that are feeling depressed or feeling alone or whatever. And I find it pretty weird that we all kind of like went through, I would say, like, not all went through the same thing, but we kind of had like similar upbringings, especially because like I want to target more like the neurodivergent and the more African American collection of people, because I feel like that kind of niche relates to me a lot more, because I know what I went through dealing with neurodivergence, not really understanding what neurodivergence was when I was a kid until I studied it later, like, last year, and I started to really understand, like, hey, I'm neurodivergent. This is why I act this way. This is why I do these things, and I didn't really understand that when I was a kid. And it definitely influenced the way that I think about things, and it definitely influenced the way that I thought and my sympathy with people. Like, being overly sympathetic when you are neurodivergent is literally the biggest curse that you can have known to man, because it will literally ruin yourself, because you start minimizing yourself, right? You start to become less than, right? The whole principle of what I'm trying to say is that when you couple all of these factors in with sympathy and empathy, right? You get someone who starts to limit themselves if they believe they aren't enough, right? If they're not being approached enough, or if they're not communicating enough with enough people, you get someone who it starts to become more of like a recluse, more closed off, because they feel like they don't really fit in anywhere. And it's because they don't really make the attempt to fit in anywhere, because now they're feeling, like, hey, like, I'm really alone. Like, hey, I'm really lonely. They start to feel that a lot more. So they start to find comfort in the fact that they're alone, right? Which is, I mean, that's totally okay, because you don't want to be like that one person that always needs someone to hang around with, right? Like, it's okay to be alone. It's okay to be lonely, right? And it's okay to acknowledge that you're lonely, but don't let factors that are non-existent be the reason why you're lonely. You know what I mean? Like, don't let the fact that you think you're not funny be the reason why you're not going out and trying to be funny or trying to communicate with other people. Don't let you thinking that you're unattractive stop you from trying to make friends or be friends, or talk to different people or associate with different people. Don't let these factors that you think are relevant to your character, that are actually not even relevant to anybody, stop you from trying to associate with different people, right? So that's just my takeaway from what I've been thinking recently, and that's pretty much the whole premise of this video. But if you enjoyed it, like, subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next one.